How do I find a new job? How can I make a career change? And the biggest question of all, can I really find a career that I love? Hey, my name is Jen Smith, and I believe career success doesn't have to be at the expense of living a radiantly happy and healthy lifestyle. As a former HR leader and recruiter turned career coach, I get what companies are looking for when hiring top talent. What that means for you is an unmatched combination of insider knowledge and the best kept secrets about making heart-based career changes and navigating the ups and downs of job searching in today's world of work. Whether you're a recent graduate navigating the job market for the first time or a seasoned professional ready for a career change, this show is for you. So grab your coffee or your kombucha, pull up a seat, and get ready to be challenged and inspired to move beyond your self-doubt and take the right next steps towards landing a career you love. Because you deserve a long, radiantly happy and healthy career. This is the Flourish Careers podcast. Hello, and welcome back to the Flourish Careers podcast. I'm Jen Smith, your host, and today I'm thrilled to be here for another installment of Flourishing Together, a monthly segment dedicated to curated conversations with industry insiders sharing wisdom and strategies for improving your work and well-being. And today, I am delighted to introduce you to Shannon Talbot. Shannon is a certified health, life, and transformational coach, a former corporate leader in the advertising and financial services industries. Shannon started her own coaching and speaking company to help working professionals live happier, healthier, and more fulfilling lives. Shannon has an MBA and has been featured on multiple media platforms, including one of my favorites, Thrive Global. Shannon is the author of Breaking Free, Stop Holding Back, Start Being You, your guide to creating the career and life of your dreams. I have already recommended this book to a bunch of people. It is very relatable, has excellent stories and practical exercises, so you definitely want to go out and get the book. And today we're actually going to talk about a highlight from Shannon's book that really jumped out to me that I know so many people struggle with, which is the 3 Ps: perfectionism, perception, and people pleasing. So Shannon, welcome to the show.
Hello, and thanks for having me, Jen.
Yes, your book. So let's get into your book. So your book starts with a compelling story about your sons. So one who unfortunately spent some time in the hospital. He's okay now, but it was a long haul, it sounded like. And then the other one who challenged you to be, quote unquote, less angry.
Yeah.
So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about these moments and how they helped you make a significant shift in your career and your life.
Sure. And fun fact, they were both 5 years old when each of these moments happened. So I'm like, I don't know what it is about 5-year-olds.
5-year-olds.
They're very wise. Listen to them.
Yes.
So my oldest son, who's 10 now, when he was 5, he was hospitalized for what I call his appendix gone rogue. So which should have been a very simple procedure, turned into a nightmare, 31-day stay in the hospital, including Christmas Day that year. And my husband and I had to cancel our 10th wedding anniversary trip to Costa Rica and, all the stuff.
Yeah.
But it was the first time in my career. So I was working in banking at the time, and I was actually going for a promotion. So I had previously been, and I know levels are different. I'm in Canada. Levels are a bit different some places, but I had been a director at the bank I was at previously. And then I changed companies for more work-life balance. And I moved to a different bank as a senior manager, which is a step down here in title. But I got paid more, but no one sees how much you get paid, right? So, and I was then going with the plan that my boss who hired me wanted to move on. So he was like, come over and then you can take over when I move on.
Mm-hmm.
Things changed. New people came in. They added a couple extra layers into our organization. And I was going for the director role. I was, going through, it was a 4-month interviewing process.
Oh my goodness.
Which was ridiculous.
Yes.
And meanwhile, so that started, I think, in the fall. And then December is when my son was hospitalized, mid-December. And things slowed down then. It was a slower time of year. So it was the first time my career took a backseat. And my focus was my 5-year-old, plus we had a 3-year-old at home. And my husband and I took turns staying overnight every night. And you don't sleep much in a hospital room.
Yeah.
People coming in all night. So it was during that time that it was actually really quiet and peaceful. And I cherished the time. It was like, it sounds bizarre, but it's one of my favorite times in my life. Plus, it was really great one-on-one time with my oldest. And I asked myself 3 questions. I said, am I happy? Am I healthy? Do I feel fulfilled?
Mm.
And my answers were, not really. And then what comes next is guilt, right? Because it's like, Shannon, how can you not feel this? Like on paper, you look so great. You have it all.
Right.
But inside, I didn't feel like I had it all. So this was the first time where I was like, screw the guilt. Like, you're not going to get in my way this time. I'm going to start a journey to live a happier, healthier, more fulfilling life. And I joke, and I know this is a podcast all about careers, but my top priority was my career.
Yes.
It's always kind of been my career. So I started with my career.
Yeah.
And I ended up moving into the advertising space. But at the same time, I also set a 10-year vision.
Mm.
So I set a vision. And I came away, it was my first time working with a coach, actually. I'd never worked with a coach before. And I went because I just felt stuck. And my confidence was an all-time low. Oh, because I didn't get the promotion through all that too.
Of course.
My confidence was at an all-time low. I was like, what am I doing? What's next? And I didn't even I didn't even plan to stay in banking that long. That wasn't the plan. So I ended up, sorry, this is turning into a long story, but
That's
I'll pick it up.
It's a good story.
Going away to a retreat. And what came out of that shocked me. So it came out, I had one sentence. I am a successful entrepreneur who helps people live happier, healthier, and more fulfilling lives. And I was like, whoa, like, who am I to do that? That's so bizarre. My whole background's business. I don't know how that's going to happen. But I said it for 10 years. And I was like, okay, we'll leave it over there and I'll figure it out. And then in the meantime, I moved into advertising. I still hadn't really worked on the health aspect, which was not good. So anyone listening, prioritize your well-being and your health and your career. You'll just end up doing really well in your career as a result.
Oh, I love that.
So the second piece was then I went into advertising. My hours were through the roof, but it was a super fun job. And I actually went up two levels. So I went from a senior manager to a vice president.
Nice.
Which was 2 levels here. So I had a lot, like really great team, biggest team I'd ever had. So fun. But the hours and the stress were ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
And I still had not prioritized my well-being and learned to like exercise and take care of myself and all those great things. Hence, a few years ago, I was pushing my 5-year-old on my youngest then, who was 5, on the swing. And he said, Mommy, can I give you a goal this year? And I got all excited. I was like, yeah, bud, what's your goal? Give me a goal. I was doing my coaching certifications at the time. He goes, can you be less angry this year?
Oh.
You're angry all the time. And it was really hard to hear. Also because this was a couple years into my journey now that showed then, okay, yes, I've done okay in my career, but I still haven't tackled the other areas. And that was the wake-up call I needed to then be like, okay, Shannon, time to that's it. Your time is up. And I decided to take the leap. I changed I started my own business a few months later. I work a lot less hours. I have more balance. I started prioritizing my well-being and exercising and all that mindfulness and all that great stuff. But it took time and it took some false starts to get here.
It usually does. And it took some reflection from your littles to bring it out in you.
Yeah, they get all the credit for that.
I mean, I think that really stands out. And a lot of people can relate to that. And having someone like that reflect back to you about what's going on in your own life and how you're showing up for the most important people in your life. And that really makes a big difference. And I like how you mentioned around, prioritizing career. And I always talk to folks around the fact that we spend a third of our lives working. We might as well make it a place where we feel happy and healthy and fulfilled. And a lot of times, people I talk to and work with have spent, 10 years doing something and they look back and they're like, what just happened? And I can totally relate to that. It sounds like you can relate to that.
Yeah.
But pausing and saying, am I happy? Am I healthy and am I fulfilled is so powerful to take that moment in that pause and do some reflection in order to make some shifts. So
Yeah.
I'm proud of you for doing that. It took some
Thank
time for
you.
sure. So I get it. I totally get it. There was another portion in your book that stood out around, I think you were reading in the hospital, Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, where she talks very openly about not wanting to be a lawyer anymore. So I have a feeling folks can relate to that. Do you mind sharing a little bit more about that moment too?
Totally. So, side note too of me. So my husband and I couldn't get pregnant. So also while working, and again, it could be, we have unexplained infertility. Part of me thinks it's partially because I never learned to manage my stress. No one knew I was stressed at work. I was great at hiding it, but I never managed it. And I never really dealt with it. And I also had undiagnosed anxiety that I never knew about. So silver lining, we ended up adopting our 2 boys and I wouldn't change it.
I love that. Yeah.
But silver lining at the fertility clinic, I don't know if any of you listening have ever gone to a fertility clinic or if it's different there, but you have to go super early. And it's first come, first serve. There's no appointments. And I think the clinic opened at 7 a.m. So I would get there at like 6:15 to be one of the first in line. So I wouldn't be late for work because I didn't want my work to know what I was going through. And I didn't want to be late for work.
Oh my goodness.
Meanwhile, once I finally told my boss, she was incredibly supportive and everything was fine. So I should have told her sooner. But anyway, there was nothing to do in line. So I eventually started talking to this woman behind me and we became friends. And so when I was in the hospital, she texted me and said, oh, you should really read Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, because she talks about her fertility journey. And I think you'd find it relatable. So that's why. So I literally texted my husband. I'm like, on your way to the hospital, please go to the bookstore and get me this book. I started reading it. And yes, that was a bit relatable. But what stood out, it ended up being a small portion of the book. But what stood out more for me was her admitting she didn't want to be this corporate lawyer anymore. And she was okay with giving up the big paycheck to pursue a career that lit her up more. And she moved into healthcare. And her mom was like, what are you doing? You've worked so hard, right? When you do this, then you go to all the schooling for a career like that and then move. And it's, potentially, I think in her case, it was a bit more hours at times, but less pay, all that. But she gave herself permission to do that and to follow her heart. And that was a light bulb moment for me because I was like, oh, wait. I don't have to work in banking for my whole life. I could change what I do. And it sounds so silly to say out loud, but I had just gotten into this path. I was good at it. I made good money. I felt like it was a secure job. And at this point, like now being a mom, I was like, oh, who am I to chase my dreams? What? And reading that was all I needed to be like, no, we're all entitled to chase our dreams, big or small, and bring more fulfillment and joy into our lives. And for me, it was no longer about title and money because that is what I chased for so long. But each time I got it, it was great for 2 weeks. And then I'd be like, what's next? What's next? So it never ended. So for me, I was like, no, it is time to follow my heart and find a career that lights me up.
Well, I'm so glad that you read that book and Michelle Obama created that opportunity for you to see kind of beyond what you were going through in the moment. And now you're doing that for other people. So it's paying it forward in so many ways, which is just a beautiful thing. So that part of your book really stood out to me. And I was cracking up because I think you said something to the effect of like your friend smuggled in wine for you in a Starbucks cup and you're reading this book in the hospital. I was like, that would totally be me. I could totally see myself.
Like, do I mention that part? Is that okay to say on here? But yes, my friend totally snuck me in wine and it was hilarious and I loved it. My son would be sleeping and I was like drinking. I felt like, I was drinking bootleg wine in the hospital room of a children's hospital.
Oh my goodness. The things it takes for us to get out of our own way, right? So excellent. Well, let's get into the 3 P's. So we've got perfectionism, perception, and people pleasing. So I want to start with people pleasing. Can you tell us about a time when you felt the pressure to please others and how that kind of affected your overall sense of fulfillment?
Yeah, and I think it's trying to think. I don't know if I can think of one exact specific time, and maybe there was a time in the book, but I'm drawing a blank right now. But I think it's just in general, especially if you're kind of middle manager level, and you have a team that you're responsible for, but then you also report into somebody else, and it's a lot of times I worked for, rightly so, they were in a leadership position, but like very driven, ambitious leaders, and who had uber high expectations. I also am somebody, my husband used to have to point out to me that I also have uber high expectations of myself and others, and that I had to work on. But it was this thing of like, your boss would ask you to do something. And and I did get better. When I worked in advertising, this area I did get better in. But it was like, it might involve the team working on the weekend to get something done. But I'd be like, yeah, no problem. We'll figure it out. Right? We'll figure it out. We got this. And then you go to your team and like, you have to figure it out. And a lot of times, actually, a couple examples is it would mean I was doing work that I'd be proofreading emails sometimes in the advertising agency until 2 a.m, which, wasn't necessarily my job, but I didn't want my team to be going through it alone. Or, they were already busy. So it's just giving up your time and your priorities for other people, right? And we do that in our personal lives a lot too. We do it whenever somebody asks us to do something, we have too much on our plate, but we don't want to disappoint them. We don't want to let them down. Or the other side of it is, sometimes it's not even about that. Sometimes it's like we have this fear of losing our jobs or not getting a promotion. So we immediately go to the worst case scenario. Ooh, if I say no, if I push back, I'm going to lose my job tomorrow, right? And we go to those big, like uber worst case scenarios that are likely not going to happen. But we put those into our minds. And then the thing about people pleasing is once you've started the pattern, you're going to be who that person goes to because they know you're going to say yes. And it just starts this whole vicious cycle.
It does. I talk to so many people about this, myself included. It's just really hard because you want to be liked and you want people to be able to count on you and all of these things. So you end up just overexerting, overgiving all the things until you don't have any more to give. And then you get resentful because you did that. So it can be kind of this vicious cycle. And I think you hit on it when you said around being the go-to person. So once you say yes, you're always going to be that go-to person, and it's really going to start to take a toll after some time. And so to that point, saying no is very hard at work, and setting boundaries is really hard when it comes to people-pleasing tendencies. So do you have any tips or practical insights on how people can go about this at work?
So first, I think you need to understand, like, what are you saying no to? By saying yes to someone, what are you saying no to? Are you saying no to your kids? Are you saying no to your partner? A volunteer activity you wanted to do? Like perhaps you're deprioritizing your well-being, your workout, because you're now going to work. So it's looking at what is the cost that's happening to you and really letting that sink in, right? Because we go to, oh, but that feels selfish. And it's like, well, if it feels selfish, which is a big problem of people pleasers, then who is at a disservice by you people pleasing somebody else? Because you know what? Like, as they say, and I have a love-hate relationship with this, right? Where it's like, your work's not going to be there for you if you get sick or blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, I do think the right company, the right people will be. But it is true. You could be let go tomorrow. And then what? Like, what was all that hard work worth? What I found, This is a harder tip to do. And I don't actually think I talk about this in the book. But pretend you're leaving that job in 2 weeks. And how would you act differently? If you know you're not fearful of losing your job or of, that boss liking you or whoever it is. So when I was working in the advertising agency, how many months in? About a year in is when I knew I was going to start to pursue my own company. I didn't know when yet, but I went and I'd signed up to become a coach and all of those things. And it just so happened, it all happened when I was on vacation. And when I came back, I had a plan B, right? So it was like, okay, I'm going to still work my butt off because I still want to do a good job. But I know that in time, I'm going to start my own business. That is when my career took off.
Of course.
I set boundaries. I said no. I raised my voice. I spoke up, not raised my voice. I didn't yell. I don't yell at people. I spoke up. I cared less about what others thought of me, which we're also going to talk about. Oh. And it's interesting because my boss didn't know any of the behind the scenes, but she would say, wow, when you got back from your vacation, you really stepped up.
Wow.
And she saw a dramatically different Shannon. And I was also picked as one of 3 leaders to attend a leadership summit the following spring.
Wow.
And things. So I tell people, and I know it's harder to do if it's not real, but have a plan B or pretend you have a plan B so that you're able to be more authentic and more you and set those priorities and those boundaries and stick to them.
Yes, I always recommend a plan B because you just never know. So being in the career space, this economy is so up and down and it changes so much and you just never know. So whether your plan B is actually going to happen or not going to happen, just having it. Here's a great example of just how having it can help you set boundaries and speak up more and say no because you know you've got that plan B. So it's almost like probably a psychological thing as well, So hey, I've got this plan B. I'm going to be fine no matter what. So I'm going to tell my boss no that I can't take on this additional work. I'm going to do it very diplomatically and very respectfully, but I'm going to say no. I'm going to set that boundary so I can go to my kid's game or whatever it is. So yeah, I think that's a really good thought. And the other piece I want to highlight here is the reframe. And it was something to the effect of by saying no to one thing, you're saying yes to something else. Yeah. So even if you're saying no to something at work, you are saying yes to whatever else that is, your husband, your kids, your friends, yourself, which I know is hard. But if you do say yes to someone else for that time or, whatever the thing is, that can be really powerful as well. So I just wanted to call that out and highlight that as well. So thank you for sharing.
Oh, thanks.
Let's talk about perfectionism next. Another P that is a double-edged sword because you want to drive for excellence, but that also can lead to stress and burnout. So how do you navigate this fine line between striving for excellence and then surrendering to this progress over perfection is one of the mantras I have to continue to tell myself.
Yeah. And I'm going to admit to y'all that it is still a big struggle. Yeah. I recently got the hardcover copies of my book from Amazon. They took a lot longer to print than the paperback, and they arrived and I didn't like the quality.
Oh,
and
no.
I was really disappointed. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then my husband looked at them and he's like, they're not as bad as you're making them out to be. And he goes, you're such a perfectionist. I'm like, well, but anyway, I just still struggle with it. But I think with perfectionism, and I talk about this in the book, it's unless you are in a field, an industry, literally that is life or death, you do not need to strive for perfection. Right? If you're a doctor, I hope you're striving for perfection, right? Right? Or if you're an air traffic controller, yes, please do a great job. If you're anybody else, lower your expectations because we're not perfect. And we spend so much time much more time than is needed, striving for perfection. I know you talk about too, our energy. So it's not even just physical time we're wasting. Right. It's draining our energy, right? And you may be working on something. Chances are the person's really not going to notice the difference. So as Sheryl Sandberg said, done is better than perfect, or progress over perfection. Love that. It's, you know what, just get it out there. And yeah, if you have to make tweaks or if you have to update it, sure, that's fine. But we need to really lower our expectations, I think, of everything, because we set them so high and then we're constantly disappointed, or we just never finish what we need to get done.
Yeah, I see a lot of people that get stuck in that not finishing because it's not perfect, or not being able to move forward because a section or something isn't perfect. And that can be a really tough cycle to get out of. One of the things someone said to me previously in my career that really stuck, that I share with folks too, is that for high achievers and for achievers and kind of this perfectionist mentality, when you think about it, when you throttle back to, let's say, 50%, that's most people's 100%.
Yes.
So it's
so
okay. It is
Yes.
okay to throttle back on whatever it is and just kind of use that mentality in order to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And then I also loved what you share in the book around when you give 110% in your job, you're not getting 110% of your salary back. So that's another thing to just kind of like put into perspective. Yeah, it might lead to a promotion or something like that. But when you can constantly do that and give without the receiving again, that's where, it can get into a tricky cycle.
Yeah. And interesting. I had a coaching client who was, her boyfriend actually hired me because he was like, she's burning out and she needs help. So I worked with her and she was lovely. It was really great. But she was putting in so much effort to get a bigger bonus that year. And I had her do the math. And I was like, okay, I want you to go away. I'm like, you don't have to share numbers with me unless you want. But I said, I want you to go away and I want you to look at how many extra hours you're putting in and what that incremental bonus amount could be. And I want you to come back and tell me how much it is per hour. And it was like she could have gone and gotten a job at McDonald's instead, right? Like not slogging anyone who works at McDonald's.
No, I get it. Yeah.
It was, sometimes we have to do these exercises because, again, it's the status of it or it's the big goal we have. But in reality, it may not bring us more joy. It may just drain our energy and it's not going to be worth it always.
It's not worth it. Yeah. Yeah. So done is better than perfect, my friends, or progress over perfection. It's a mantra. I have to put it on Post-it notes all over my computer sometimes. So,
and sorry, one last thing on that. So Jay Shetty, his, if anyone listens to Jay Shetty, one of his podcast episodes talked about this because he's a struggling perfectionist too. And I think he said he releases his podcasts when he's 70% okay with them.
Oh.
Because he was striving for perfection. And then again, you're not getting it out. So now I think his bar is 70%. So when he feels like it's 70% done, it's released.
He's good with it.
Yeah.
It's so funny that you share that story because just this morning, I was contemplating re-recording a solo episode that I recorded yesterday that wasn't perfect.
Oh, no.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I got to re-record this. I was going to rush to do it. And then I said in my head, progress is better than perfection. Just go with it. And now you shared the story. I feel like that Jay Shetty story was meant for me for today. So thank you for that. You just saved me 35 minutes or 45 minutes from re-recording a podcast.
Yep. There you go.
So funny. And if Jay Shetty can do that, I mean, we can all kind of learn from that and incorporate that into our lives. So good story. Thank you. Let's move on to the third P, which is perception. I talk with so many heart-based professionals who are so nervous about what other people are going to think, and it holds them back from making any kind of change. And in this society that we live in, this external validation just seems essential. So how do you prioritize your needs over these expectations or perceptions from others?
This is also one I still struggle with, for sure. Especially now, my career I've moved more into speaking engagements versus coaching. And so, I'm speaking to audiences of different sizes, different industries. And it's like, oh, are they going to like me? Are they going to like my talk? And, that's still something I struggle with. I think the biggest piece of advice I've ever received is, not everyone is going to like you.
Mm-hmm.
And if everyone is liking you, everyone around you is liking you, then you are not being authentic. You are, again, people pleasing or catering yourself to appease to those people. And I also have a client who one of her bosses told her that, especially if you're in a leadership position, if everyone likes you and is agreeing with you at the table, you are not doing your job.
Yeah, you're not
because
making
your
hard
job
decisions.
sometimes is to give a differing opinion or make the hard decision or bring up the topic people don't want to talk about or go to the place, people don't want to go to. And I think that's a thing. And it's just, the more authentic you can be, the less you're actually, over time, the less you're going to care about what others think. I think when we're stuck in that spot of like, oh, are they going to like me or what do they think of me? And then we're just, full of anxiety and it's, our thoughts are so negative and it just kind of consumes us. And as, we were talking before the podcast, it's harder to be present when you're always worried about that. So the more you can be present, the more you can be your authentic self, and just understand that in time, the right people will be around you.
Yes. And I will add something that you alluded to, and it kind of speaks to this over time. It takes practice. So there's another P for everybody. It takes practice. It takes practice to do any of these things.
Yeah.
So give yourself a little bit of grace and space in order to grow, and just kind of keeping these things in the back of your mind, I think will help too. You shared in the book, you might have even mentioned you had this on a Post-it note. It was CLWOT. So tell us.
Sounds like a dirty word. I don't know. It makes me giggle every time I see it. I'm like, oh, it feels dirty. But yes, CWLOT, right?
CLWOT.
CLWOT, yes.
Yeah.
So good point. You know what? I changed my screen and that Post-it note's gone, but I should bring it back. I have it as a note on my phone too. But it's care less what others think.
Yes, I love it.
Yes. And I also did, so every New Year's, I'm not a big resolution person anymore. I was for years, but I failed at resolutions for years. But what I've started doing in January is letting go of things I want to leave in the year behind. So one year I wrote care less what others think on a piece of paper, I guess I wrote other people's opinions on a piece of paper and I put it in a fire.
Oh.
So that I could kind of celebrate and commemorate that no longer having such a hold on me anymore.
Yeah, it really does. And then sometimes you dig down, you're like, who am I really worried about? And it's usually like an old boss from 10 years ago that doesn't even remember you, or, is going to be praising you for doing whatever you're doing because you're growing and developing in your career. And I think a lot of times too, people think of social media, and of course we're comparing to someone else's highlights and, probably a completely different situation. And what does that really matter anyways? And so it's just like all these stories that you start telling yourself and going through. But if you can care less what others think, and just practice that and not worry about it and know that you have so much to share and gifts to give, and whatever change or transition that you're going through makes a big difference. So,
yeah. And then I also have, I don't know if Schitt's Creek. You know that show?
Yeah. Yes.
So it's a Canadian show. And and there's a character, Moira Rose, in it. And she, I also just picture, so I have a thing too, be more like Moira Rose. Because she's wearing these out there outfits and just how she is, and she doesn't care.
Yeah.
And so that is also, if you have somebody that either real or made up on TV or someone that you can think about and be like, wow, they really don't care what other people think. And then tell yourself like, ooh, be like that person. Those days where it's a bit more of a struggle, that can also work too.
Yes, I love that. Have somebody to kind of be your expander so you can keep them in mind and say, oh, what would they do in this situation? And then you just go and do it. It's so funny that you say that. I remember being in corporate, and my sister's an artist and she makes jewelry. She made jewelry at the time. And these beautiful, metal smithing pieces. And there was this one bracelet, I wanted it so bad. So as soon as she put it up for sale, I got it and I was wearing it. But then I didn't feel like it fit my corporate image. And I didn't wear it to work because I felt like I had to, like the perception was, oh, that's too artsy for this work environment or whatever it was. I'm like, what the heck? Like, why was I even thinking that way? But it was really hard. And I think you shared around a tattoo. Yeah, there it is.
I'm showing for people listening. I got a tattoo on my wrist of birds in flight. It looks like the birds on my book. Tattoo came first. But yeah, because I worked in banking too, and it was very like conservative and different. In advertising, I would have been totally okay with getting a tattoo. Everyone had tattoos. But in the banking world, everyone was like, I wore suits every day and blouses and pantyhose and all that stuff that I hate now.
Yes.
I'll wear blazers, but that's about it. But yeah, so I told myself, and again, I did a lot of this to myself. No one told me I could or couldn't do this, but I was like, ooh, nope, you work for a bank, you can't have a tattoo, which is hilarious. Like I could have, but I really thought I would be perceived negatively.
It's amazing. So the bottom line from all of these 3 Ps is to get out of your own way and break free and be yourself. That's what it's all about. So as we wrap up, Shannon, would you mind sharing a flourishing favorite? So we ask everybody a book other than Breaking Free, or a podcast or a resource that's really impacted your career and why you would want to recommend it to listeners.
So for me, Phil Knight's Shoe Dog book, it's the story of Nike.
Yes.
It, to me, is such a good book. And then if you watch the documentary or the movie Air with Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, I just love that story. Inspires me. I love it. Phil Knight was a workaholic and had no work-life balance. So don't do that. Don't follow that.
Not that part of it.
But just, it was a great reminder of, like, again, getting out of your own way, trying new things, being different, going for it, even when the odds are against you, asking for the job, the promotion, whatever it is. I find stories like real life stories really inspiring. And that's what, how I learn best.
Yes, very inspirational. Well, this has been such a delight. Where can people find you out on the interwebs?
All right. You can find me at shannontalbot.com. I have a weekly newsletter you can subscribe to from there. That's free. You can find out more about my speaking and coaching programs and my book. My book is available on Amazon if anyone wants to go out and purchase that. And also, I do a lot of my posting on LinkedIn. And then I'm also on Instagram, Shannon_Talbot_coaching.
Perfect. We'll make sure we have all of those links in the show notes. Shannon, thank you for joining me today and sharing all of this wisdom with our listeners. It has been such a pleasure.
Thanks so much for having me, Jen. It was a lot of fun.
As always, the notes from today's episode will be on the blog at flourish.careers/blog. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll talk to you next time.